I started with reading biographies in my early teens and have continued to this day, moving more recently into audio format with Audible and going through a great deal of biographies uh, in documentaries, biographical documentaries, be that of groups, of individuals, of cultures, um, to kind of live the story of another life. And the different dimensions of this activity uh, begin with rest. I would say that one of my deepest seated, life anxieties is doing it wrong or deciding what to do. As I look at my life today, I regularly dream about what it would be like to uh, build community in the Philippines, what it would be like to stay in my apartment in Thailand, what it would be like to build a house nearby, what it would be like to stay here, what it might be like to develop a nonprofit more extensively, which I currently direct, whether to grow the landscape business or work, doing healing work in some way. And I feel an underlying terror of getting it wrong, of just not doing it right and then being punished and feeling alone and stuck in that state. And I don't always have an answer because, this part of me that's like, well, what do I do? I don't always know. And there's a certain anxiety, like time's ticking by, and I should do this. Or upstairs earlier this evening, shall I lay down and cuddle my wife? Am I missing an opportunity? Shall I paint? What? And there's this sense of wanting to figure it and control all of those possibilities, and an anxiety that I'm doing it wrong. Now, this ties in with the first aspect of biographies, which is rest. Because when I'm living another person's story, I don't have any of those anxieties or feelings that I need to choose. Instead, I'm witnessing. And so the first gift of a biography is rest. Let's watch what someone else does with all of these different choices and what might have they done, etc. And so explore it from a much more creative place, in the same way perhaps that helping someone else clean up their mess or improve their lives is easy and fun because you know how to do it and it's easy and fun. But going home and sorting out one's own mess is like, should I do this first or that first? And it's much more real and in that sense more pressured. And so there's this wonderful rest of just listening to a story and saying that's the way it is in that story, and allowing the creativity of imagination without pressure. Now the next thing is insight, because it's like, oh, I can see this and I can see that, and I can picture that. I can imagine what I might be like if I was this character or that character. So there's a variety of insights and documentaries and biographies that I enjoy. Then there are gifts. The gift of being able to live another lifetime without actually physically doing it, and getting to know myself in those lifetimes. So I regularly project myself out into various characters and try and get a sense of how a narrative or a story is held together by going through those various characters. And so there's a sense of being gifted that someone else explored that version of reality so that I don't have to, but I can still benefit from the shorthand version of it. And in that sense, my life is enriched. And there are also insights where I take, different, I might look at 1,000 areas that Rudolf Steiner or Edgar Cayce or Henry Ford did 1,000 things like this. And I might agree with 40% of them, but feel like they're not appropriate for me here and now. And then there'd be this one thing where I say, that's a great philosophy, I'm going to adopt that. And so I'm receiving a gift from other expressions of the human probability field. In the larger sense, other parts of myself that have lived, this human experience in different ways in different time periods. And so there's a real appreciation of those gifts. With all of that assessment of what I agree with and what I don't agree with comes consciousness. So that's another dimension of the biographical experience, is I get to be conscious of why I agree or disagree with that. And that in turn can inform and make a more conscious experience in the present that is far more graceful and full-bodied than it would be if I just said, I have no idea, I haven't thought about any of this, I've got to choose something, so I'm just going to choose this. And so consciousness leads to an abundant and an enriched and an exquisite sense of choice, out of which a better reality emerges. And there's also a certain confidence in having vicariously lived in a biographical imaginary framework as I recreate these patterns in order to live someone else's life through their biography. Last night, my wife and I watched Maria by Callas, one of the films on the biography of Maria Callas, and noticing her choices and what other choices and what I would have done in the same situation, noticing her maturity in ways where I am not mature. It was just a very heartfelt experience to appreciate someone making a graceful set of possibilities with a given set of variables that were not ideal, that were quite awkward at times, but just looking how she pieced all those together, it touched me, and I think it touched my wife a little bit as well, as we explored what she could learn from Maria, what the culture could learn, meaning if we want more great beings in our culture, we have to learn to honor greatness when it presents itself, and the damage and the sadness of what's lost in a culture that attacks Maria for getting sick and then she doesn't want to perform as much as a very natural self-defense, the way the cruelty of a culture towards itself in a certain sense can express itself in these dramas, and the transcendence of her presence and generosity.